Hello there, this is episode 8 of the Because I'm Carlos podcast. So, recording on a Thursday evening into a Friday morning, enjoying what I'll call, for the sake of argument, I'll call it a compelling football game on Thursday night. Washington and the Giants are playing, good enough. It's competitive, I'll call it that. It's been a struggle back and forth a little bit. But nonetheless, I do enjoy watching my football. I find it very funny, and I've talked about it in the live stream. And one of the things that I enjoy talking about, and really quickly, actually, while I'm on the subject, as I'm recording this, I'll be doing the live stream on Friday evening. So I'm recording this, and by the time I'm done recording and editing, probably it'll be the same day. So later on this evening, 9 p.m. Eastern time on Friday, I will be doing the live stream. More than likely be joined by Bobby Burrell. You never know. He's we don't have a formal co-hosting agreement, but it's one of those things where we just hang out and chat. It's kind of a fun hobby chat, talking about a variety of whatever different things we want to talk about. We do have a couple of things we want to talk about, I think, this time around, and I'll bring up a couple of topics, and I'll see if I can get a couple of guests to join me, and we'll have a little bit of fun with it. But you never know. You never know what's going to happen. It's always been a different thing. And this past week, I had Name Cardinal joining us in the last hour of a nearly 6-hour live stream. It was one of those things where it wasn't exactly planned, but it was one of those things once I saw him around, I say, hey, come on, join us. He's in a different time zone, so it's a little bit earlier for him. But I was like, I don't know, join us for a bit. And we ended up talking about some action movies in addition to talking about some cards and stuff like that. So it's one of those things where it's a chat that can go in a variety of different directions. Hopefully it doesn't go 6 hours again. We used to do that on a semi-regular basis, and I'd rather not. If we can, if we can avoid it a little bit, I'd be okay with that. But anyway, let me get to the point of this one. It's been a little bit since I did the last one of these, and I did want to come back and chat, and I said it would be semi-regular. I didn't pick any particular cadence, thank goodness, because it's been a little bit quiet in terms of hobby news. They did have the trade show, and that's fine. But it's one of those things where no real big news came out of the trade show. After Fanatics basically, bought out the world as far as exclusives in the different things, we ended up in kind of a stasis because the hobby was just kind of a bated breath waiting for the next thing to happen. And the only thing you could really react to is just content. That's really where you ended up finding yourself. And I was okay with that. It's one of those things where it's kind of fun, but I found myself just in a situation where, like, okay, I've got my work business and my life business. And unless there's something like, earth shattering, what are we going to sit there and, chat about? And by the way, just for the record, as I'm recording this and I'm saying this, there's about 4.5 minutes left in the Thursday night football game. And all of a sudden, Washington has decided to make it interesting. All of a sudden, they decided to actually score a touchdown instead of just a million field goals between the two teams. So you are catching this semi-live as I'm recording this. But anyway, the point is this. The hobby itself is kind of with bated breath. But as a collector, the hobby never sleeps. In reality, kind of my point that I want to make as part of this particular episode is that the hobby never sleeps as a collector. It's one of those things where we have our ebbs and flows, and I've kind of touched on this theme in the past. But in reality, like for me as a collector, I have been a little bit pickier recently, but I found a couple of pieces here and there on eBay that I found that it kind of piqued my interest. So I ended up making moves for them, and even as I speak, I made an offer on a different card, which would be a very cool piece to add, but I'm not going to talk about it until such time that I'm able to come to a deal on it. So I've made an offer, and we'll see if they come back with anything or if they decide to make a move on it, and we'll go from there. But there's always something. For the most of a majority of us as collectors, we basically try to find different things that pique our interest. However, that said, I do want to make a point that I myself do find myself with different projects that I'm working on, but it is always a constant refrain and an attempt to try to resist temptation to add additional projects. And it's one of those things where the focus element becomes really important. And that's one of the themes that I want to touch on here tonight. And there is another one that I want to touch on as well. But first, I want to focus on the focus piece. And that is that as you go along in your collecting journey, whatever that happens to be for you, I'm a player collector who delves into some other topics as well, and some other genres and categories inside of collecting. But when I do that, it is very tempting to look at, oh my goodness, it's all the shiny. And I can give you a concrete example. One of the things that I was looking at recently, and I came across an example, and as soon as I saw it, I started down the rabbit hole of looking, but I have been able to resist thus far. I may still go down that rabbit hole later on, but for the moment I have resisted. But I was looking at the 1999 Topps Chrome Lords of the Diamond Refractor set. And I was looking at the checklist and I was looking at some of the possibilities. I did do a little bit of a deep dive on eBay just to see what was out there and what the pricing was for it and everything. And to be honest, very tempting. Very tempting. I'm saying this to you because I haven't done it. And because I may still do it down the road, but I'm not worried about it. At the end of the day, I'm not trying to pump up this set. It's a random late 90s baseball, insert set parallel, no less. But, do whatever you want. I'm just looking at it because I think the checklist is kind of cool. I think that I do enjoy. Baseball is still my favorite. I've said it repeatedly on the live stream and on the channel. It's funny because I'm predominantly known on my channel as the Mike Modano collector, and I'm in Canada and we collect hockey predominantly here. And it's one of those things where I have an appreciation for a lot of the hockey sets and things because I grew up with them. It's kind of my bread and butter. But at the same time, like baseball was my first love, and baseball is still my first love as a game. And it's one of those things. That's the reason why I have my Juan Soto collection. And it's one of those, the Juan Soto collection, in contrast to my Modano collection, I'll touch on this briefly, just because I've mentioned it repeatedly on the channel. Part of the difference between the two collections is that the Modano collection has been ongoing for 25 years. I've been collecting Mike Modano cards for a quarter of a century. And that's not an exaggeration. That's actual reality. And in reality, actually, we basically passed that now. I started collecting it in 1995, and we're into 2021, so that's actually 26 years. So it's more than a quarter of a century. The Juan Soto collection is more recent, but it's just my appreciation of Juan Soto as a baseball player. I enjoy Juan Soto passes the eye test for me. Does that mean he'll be an all-time great? No, not necessarily, because you never know. You have no idea what's going to happen. Injuries happen. A player could lose interest. You never know what's going to happen. But his batting eye at such a young age is so impressive to me that it passes my eye test. That's my interest level. So for me, it's a matter of, with Juan Soto, as much as fun as it is to accumulate a mass number of cards, like I have for the Mike Modano collection, where I'm right on the precipice of 2,200 unique Mike Modano cards, and I have a few that should be incoming. And when I do, more than likely I will cross that line, or I'll get damn close to that line, which is a ton. And he's got almost 5,000. He's got over 5,000 cards on his checklist. So it's one of those things where even still, there's so many out there that I could be chasing. But I'm at the stage where I'm really just kind of chasing what piques my interest. And even with that said, I already have so many over the years that I've accumulated. The Juan Soto collection, the goal long term is to really have kind of a Mount Rushmore type of collection. And that's kind of the theme that I've gone with that one, is that, yes, I do have a variety of different cards from his collections, and I do have a variety of different ones, but I have tried, even though I have a Z Folio where I'll pick up some shiny, cool cards that are kind of fun. A lot of them are inexpensive. A lot of them are fun to pick up and collect. I do also have a section of the collection that is dedicated to some really limited pieces, or even barring that, some really higher end pieces. And I'm completely okay with having the Z Folio section that's just really cool cards that are inexpensive, that are fun to pick up, and then have a section of it dedicated to, no, these are really tough. These are tougher to come by pieces. They're going to require a little bit more work. They're going to require, some real diligence and some thought process into them. It's not going to be just spend the money. It's fine. No. You're going to have to think about this one a little bit. And that to me is completely okay. That to me is a fun way of collecting, and I enjoy that as well as having the big mass volume of player collection like I do for the Modano collection. But baseball, as I said, is my first love as far as that's concerned, and I still do enjoy baseball cards. Not all of them, not all the time. I'm not going to collect everything in creation. It's just not something I'm going to do. But having these different varying interests keeps things interesting from a collector perspective. So even when, quote unquote, the hobby news isn't too crazy, as a collector, you still have plenty to keep an eye on and plenty to do. And that's part of the fun, having your own projects and coming up with different things. And that's what I encourage people to do. I encourage you as a collector to find different areas that are interesting to you. I encourage you as a collector to find things that are fun for you to do. I encourage you to find projects that pique your interest. I also encourage you not just buy everything in creation. Even if, of course, we love, as collectors, a lot of us do end up kind of having to resist the urge to hoard because we want to hoard. We want to get all the shiny things or all the interesting things or whatever that happens to be, or all the rare things, as expensive as that might be. And you have to kind of resist. So the first section of this podcast is more just kind of talking to you as the collector and just saying it's completely okay to have desires and interests in these very different areas. But I do encourage you to be a little bit particular. I encourage you to be thoughtful as far as what you decide to pursue, because there are so many options and so many temptations that you could go in a million different directions. And it's one of those things where it's an opportunity to get a bunch of cards and accomplish very little because you don't really kind of direct your focus in any particular direction. And it's hard to do. And I fight this all the time myself. And I'm hardly going to present myself as a paragon of this. I'm not going to present myself as an example to you because I'm not particularly good at it all the time. I do have my moments where I'm good at staying focused, and I have my moments where I kind of like my eyes wander to the next shiny thing, the next shiny object that catches my eye. And that's just kind of the way it is. You have to understand that. Do understand that that is part and parcel of the game, so to speak. Now, second thing I want to talk about real quick. I want to focus my attention on a little bit of a different topic. And it was this. I noticed on social media, because I do keep track of a lot of different things, even when, like I said, the news is a little bit quiet, there's always something going on in the hobby, and that's kind of the fun of it. And one of the things that I noticed was that SGC came out with an announcement. Peter, from their vice president of SGC, or president of SGC, I think, came out and said basically, hey, and it was a transparent moment. He's being very transparent. And as part of his transparency, he's saying that, hey, we're starting to pick up a little bit of business. We're starting to get a little bit more stuff coming in. And we're worried that we're not going to be able to meet our previous expectations as far as our turnaround times. And SGC has been pretty good about the turnaround times recently because for the most part, and this is something that I've talked about on the live stream quite a fair bit. And it sounds derisive, but it's not. It's just a statement of fact. Their volume has not been anywhere near some of the other third-party graders, because if it was, they would have already been backed up, or they would have already started to raise their prices in response. Now, they have done a tremendous job, a wonderful job. They did this at the National, they've done this since, and they've done a great job of presenting themselves professionally, doing a great job, saying all the right things. And by the way, I'm happy that they're doing that, but it's one of those things where this whole time, they've been able to avoid a lot of the pitfalls of what happens when you get slammed with volume because they haven't been slammed with volume. That's just the reality. It doesn't matter how many times people say, oh my God, we should all go grading with SGC. PSA sucks. I understand. I do. The reason PSA sucks right now is because they've been slammed with so much volume that even though they have the most capacity in the hobby, they can't keep up. The backlog is millions and millions of cards. They're trying their best just to get caught up. At the end of the day, they're making money, even as they're doing that. And these other companies have an opportunity, including BGS, which hasn't capitalized on it at all. They're a black box. Nobody knows what's going on with them. And SGC, who's been very transparent, very forthcoming. My point is this. When Peter from SGC did this video talking about this, he was basically presenting it as a transparency thing, which it is. It's very transparent. He says, oh, we're gonna start seeing, our times are gonna start to slow down. We're starting to see a lot more volume, and what we'll do is we'll update the website to reflect that, to give you appropriate expectations, so that we can underpromise and overdeliver. I want you to take a moment and absorb that. That's a very good phrase to use: underpromise and overdeliver. As someone who's done a lot of customer service, that is a tremendous way of approaching things. It's very sound. It's very good. Now, I do want to kind of say something to go along with that. It actually is meaningless. It is. I laughed because when I heard it, I smiled. I had a bit of a wry smile when I heard it, because no, it's not a bad thing to do. It's a smart thing to do. It is, in fact, 100% transparent. You're being clear and, with your audience. You're setting expectations appropriately. You're saying, hey, it's going to be a little bit slower than you've been accustomed to the last little while. And then please understand that that's because we're starting to get a little bit more volume on it. And that's good for SGC, by the way. Good for them. But at the same time, it's maybe it's an indictment on the rest of the hobby, where this was suddenly a reason to praise SGC. Oh man, thank you SGC for your transparency and for this. They basically told you they're going to be slower going forward. And people were happy because it also said, by the way, that, hey, by the way, we're not going to raise rates. We're just going to put a higher number on there and say that we're going to be slower. Well, CSG has been doing that already for months. Their bulk rate has been consistently been backing up, backing up, backing up. They were approaching 200 days on the bulk rate, and now I think they're about 170, give or take, at the time that I'm recording this. But now, mind you, they didn't make a big show of it. They just kind of put it on their website, and it's there. It's being transparent as well. It's transparency. My point, I think, in the second half of this podcast, and I don't want to drag it out too long, so I promise this will be the last topic that we'll cover tonight. My point here is this. It's simply this. Transparency is good. I don't want to discourage transparency. I want to make 100% clear that I am not against transparency. In fact, in the third-party grading realm, transparency is a breath of fresh air, and I do encourage it. However, it is not carte blanche to be like, oh, just because somebody's transparent, we need to praise them to high heaven. That isn't how this works. That isn't what this is. Now, fortunately, I suppose, from my last podcast, part of the fun of being not sponsored by anybody is I don't have to make anybody happy. I don't have to praise them to high heaven because I don't worry about, their checks coming in and checks clearing. The reality is SGC has done a very good job marketing themselves. They really have. They've done a very good job marketing themselves, and they've done a good job with the turnaround times, and they are consistent, and they're a legitimate third-party grader. All those things are true. All those things need to be respected. All those things need to be acknowledged. That said, people were literally praising them for being quote-unquote transparent about, oh, by the way, our service is going to get worse because we're starting to get more volume. By the way, that's good for SGC because it means they're getting more attention. It means they're getting more submissions. It means they're getting more cards in. And it means they're getting a little bit slower because their capacity isn't able to handle all the additional volume. That's okay. And by the way, that's fine. But it's one of those things where it just made me chuckle a little bit. I understood where people stood on that. And I understood why they were happy to at least get acknowledged and at least be told something. But imagine if PSA had done this, a year ago or 6 months ago. Oh, by the way, guys, we're getting slammed with so much stuff. It's going to take 2 years for you to get your cards back. Here's transparency. Do you think they get praise? No, of course not. 2 years? What the hell? Why am I waiting 2 years to get my cards? Because that's what it is. That's what the volume is. That's what the ability for them to turn around is. That's what it is. Now, if SGC had gone and raised their price, of course, they would have gotten some folks would have been slamming them for that. So it is better than having a price raise. But at the end of the day, it means they're going to be a little bit slower in returning some of the stuff. But it's good news in the sense that they were at least upfront about it. They told you right in advance. They said, hey, just understand that the expectations are going to need to be adjusted because we're getting more stuff in. That's okay. That's fine. Now, there are some additional things that I want to talk about a little bit tonight, but I don't want to drag this out. In contrast to my live streams, which apparently seems to go very long, I do want to keep the podcast a little tighter. But the point is that transparency is not carte blanche. That's my point on the second half of this, the second topic. Transparency is not carte blanche. All it means by that is that it's good that these companies are being transparent. By them, only a handful have capitalized on this. It is, but it's also a marketing tactic at this point. Just saying something and actually acknowledging things and actually saying it out loud is almost a marketing tool at this stage, which is fine. That's okay. I'm completely all right with that. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to sit here and just praise you endlessly. No, it just means that congratulations, you've done more than your competitors, which your competitors aren't doing. How low are our standards as a hobby that just because you said something, we should suddenly praise you? I'll give you one more example of this. And this is a completely different example, a little bit off the wall, and it only came the last couple of days. Probstein did a Instagram live in which he had Bill Mastro on. Now, Bill Mastro, for those of you who are not aware, is a little bit infamous in the card hobby. He actually went to jail for some of his dealings, and you can Google him. I'm not going to rehash the whole thing. There's a lot going on with it. He also had a bit of a hand in the PSA 8 Honus Wagner, the most infamous Honus Wagner, PSA card number 1. For those of you who are not aware, go Google it and look it up yourself. It's an infamous history. It's very interesting, and Bill Mastro is certainly part of hobby history, without a doubt, without question. And he went to jail for the privilege. Not for very long, but he went to jail. But it was very amusing to me listening to the interview, I guess, interview conversation, whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, it was also kind of amusing to me to see some of the comments. Some folks are like, "Oh my God," and the question was posed, I think, by Card Porn, I believe. And he said basically like, would you like Bill Master to have a place in the hobby? It's like, look, if Bill Master wants to buy cards and sell cards and do whatever, it's Bill Master's business. And if you want to buy or sell from him, it's fine. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. He's certainly entitled to that. He did serve his time. You know what? It wasn't like, it's not like he spent 25 years in penitentiary. Like, let's not over dramatize this. But he did go to jail for it. And, he served his time, the time that was given to him. And he served it. But the thing is that Bill Master has done a lot of shady things in the hobby. And that's not the end of the world. It's not, it's hardly something that we're going to have to put him in the electric chair for. So let's settle down on that. But the reality of it is that Bill Master probably shouldn't have a place in terms of any part of business in the hobby. And in the conversation, I didn't get the impression that he was shooting for anything. Bill Master is not a young man, so he wasn't shooting for anything like that. But it was very amusing to me that in the comments, people were like, "Oh, we gotta give Bill Master a chance." Like, why? It was very amusing to me. It's like, he served his time. It's perfectly fine. Like, give him a chance. It's like, we don't need to give everybody a chance just because they're around. Like, just because they exist, we don't need to give everybody and their brother a chance. Look, if you do something that's a little bit shady, it's okay for you to be kind of on the outs as far as business in the hobby. It's okay. It's fine. But I guess this goes back to kind of the transparency thing a little bit, to a certain degree, to a lesser degree. It's like, hey, he admitted, he probably could have done something else. Like, no, it wasn't exactly an admission. It was just kind of like, yeah, some people interpreted the wrong way. Like, maybe we got a little greedy. It wasn't really necessary. You can go listen to it for yourself. It was very amusing, kind of the way he presented it. It was fine. I took no moral opposition to it. But it was kind of fun to listen to, kind of the justification of it after the fact. By the way, he doesn't really need to justify himself at all. He went to jail for it. And at that point, it's like, nah, I'm cool with it. I did it, whatever. And that would have been an acceptable response for me. I'm just being honest with you guys as far as that's concerned. But the reality of it is that it's very interesting how transparency has become the latest PR weapon. SGC has adopted it, certainly. They're like, oh, we're the most transparent. It's like, that's good for you guys. Great for you. But your transparency is like nothing wrong with SGC. I already said it a million times. They're a legitimate third-party grader. They've done some good work. They do very well in turnaround times. They wouldn't do as well in turnaround times if more people submitted to them, which they're acknowledging more people are starting to. So in turn, their turnaround times are going to start to slow down a little bit. It's not as bad as PSA. It's not as bad as BGS. It's not as bad as CSG on their bulk rate and stuff like that, because the volume of submissions hasn't caught up to it. If it suddenly did, then SGC would be in the same boat as everybody else. That's just the reality. It's just the way the hobby has been, that it's been so hot and so crazy that these companies are struggling to try to find a way to do this. I understand. It's one of those things that's a little bit interesting, but I think maybe my last point, the reason why I made this whole last section about this, is that I don't want transparency to be some kind of weird carte blanche. I don't want it to be this thing where people are like, oh, we're being transparent. And everybody's like, oh man, praise them, pat them on the back. No, I'm glad they're being transparent. That's good. I do want to encourage that. That's a good thing in the hobby. But it's not this weird, like, catch-all, hey, let's absolve everybody ever. No. SGC basically said that their service is going to decline in speed, in turnaround time, for understandable reasons. But at the same time, that's all they said. That is all they said. There's no need to praise them. I'm glad they said something. I'm glad they acknowledged it. But at the same time, I was like, that's it. That's as far as it goes. Thank you for acknowledging it. Appreciate that. I'll bear it in mind as a consumer. That's it. I'm not going to heap praise upon you because you just acknowledged the obvious and you actually said it, whereas your competitors are content to sit back and not say anything. And by the way, the same obvious comes up on them. PSA is not waiting this incredibly long time and not returning all these bulk rates and all this because they're sitting there going like, ah, ha, ha, we're going to laugh at these hobbyists. That'll teach them. No, they would make tons of money if they were able to do that. They received so many cards in such a period of time. Now they made their own decision. They made their own bed and decided to lie in it. But nonetheless, because there's so many cards there, if they turned the taps back on, it would overflow immediately. They understand that. Otherwise, they just turn it on again. it's not like they're not sitting there going like, yeah, we'd love to turn it back on, but we know what's going to happen the second we do. And we're not opposed to money. The issue isn't that we're opposed to money. We would take the money, but we've already got lots of money sitting there in our warehouse that we need to grade and send back before we even worry about what net new is going to come in. So it's one of those things where it's like the same hobbyists that complain are the same hobbyists that are sitting there applauding, SGC for this. But at the same time, it's like, but all SGC told you is that your service is going to get worse for the same amount of money in terms of turnaround time. Now, not dramatically worse to the point that it should cause you too much issue, but simply it's going to get worse. That's literally all the man said. Good news. We're not going to charge you more money. That's it. That's as far as the good news goes. I just find it very funny the way it's presented. SGC fanboys do enjoy that. I don't have a problem with SGC, but at the same time, it's one of those things where they serve their purpose, but I just find it very amusing the way they get treated in relation to other ones. Now, I do have some other topics and things I want to talk about, but I am going to save some of that for the Friday live stream. We're going to have a little fun with that. A little spoiler. We're going to talk about our friends at Card Score. They did an interview on Sports Card Live this past weekend, and I got a kick out of it. I was very entertained. I got text messages about this. It was very entertaining. But let's save it for Friday. We'll talk about it some more. So Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then we'll sit there and have a bit of a chat about it. We'll talk about whatever else everybody wants to talk about. More videos and things coming up on the channel. For those folks listening on the audio version, you can check out a lot of this stuff on the Because I'm Carlos YouTube channel. You can look up Because I'm Carlos and you'll find it. For those of you listening on the YouTube channel, there is an audio version available as well by Anchor that you can listen to because a lot of this is just going to be a static image and then the audio that I present with it. So that is it. Episode 8 of the Because I'm Carlos audio podcast. Thank you for listening. If you've got any comments and you're on the YouTube side of things, you can certainly put it in the comments section. I know I went through a couple of different things. I know I went a little bit more all over the place, but it was just kind of a Thursday evening, and I'm kind of half watching the football game and half talking to you. But anyway, thanks very much for listening. We'll catch you in the next one.